joined by Shane Gibson, a data consultant, author, founder, and creator of the information product Canvas. Shane has spent decades helping organizations rethink how they approach data strategy, data products, and data delivery. He has a focus on making data work more practical, valuable, and aligned to real business outcomes. He's also the co-founder of AgileData.io and host of the Agile Data podcast. Shane, it's an honor to have you on the show, and welcome. And for the audience at home that doesn't know who Shane is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what your background is, and how you came here?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. I'm mega excited. So I kind of talk about my experience over decades because I've been doing data for a while. So I started my journey off when I was much younger, working in financial systems, ERPs before they were ERPs. Decided I absolutely hated it. It was they're horrible systems. I was lucky enough to be working for a software vendor at the time that had data capability. So I jumped over to the light side and spent my first decade working for US software companies, but I was based in New Zealand in the data space. After that, the next decade was founding and running a data and analytics consulting company. So your usual 5 to 20 people, consultants going in, doing what we called land and expand back then. So going in at a strategy level, working on the strategy, then out into selection of tooling and technologies, implementation, then bringing the team through to do all the ETL and development and data warehousing stuff back then. And then ideally, getting the customer over to support where we worked with them on an ongoing basis. And as part of that, I kind of found this passion I had where we're looking for ways of making things repeatable. So repeatable ways of working as much as repeatable technology and techniques. So kind of stumbled across this thing called patterns. And that was kind of my last decade has been working on patterns and pattern templates. And figuring out ways of teaching and coaching. So I spend half my time in our startup, although we're 7 years down now, so probably can't call ourselves a startup. And what we do there is we effectively co-design and then build information products with our customers, and then help them take those information products to market for other organizations that have their problem and co-sell with them. And then the other half of my time is coaching data and analytics teams. So where they're in an organization and they're struggling, I go in to kind of help them change the way they work and hopefully have a bit more fun doing that data work. So that's me. Originally from New Zealand for most of my life, relocated to the UK late last year, which is my new home. England? Is it Europe? Would you call it Europe? I think they opted out. I think we're coming back though.
I think I lost you there for a second, but it's okay. I'm really looking forward to hearing all of the things that you have to say about coaching data teams. Maybe let's start with a spicy question, and that is like, what is the things never like to admit is a problem, but according to your professional opinion, is a problem for data teams?
A lot of data teams are what I call in the Jira ticket factory. And it's probably not fair that I use the word Jira because it's the ticket factory, but actually they always use Jira, right? And it's this idea that their job is to get given a request, do something with data, flick it back over the fence, and close the ticket. And I think fundamentally, when I see teams behaving that way, there's a foundational problem with the organization. It's not the team's fault, right? It's the culture of the organization. It's the way the leadership works. It's a whole lot of other things, but that's one of the root cause symptoms. If I see that behavior, then for me, we need to change one or many things to make it work differently.
Talk about the whole Jira thing. Are you talking about the reactiveness or just doing exactly what's written in the ticket and nothing more part of it?
All of that, right? Like we look at the patterns. The pattern is I'll give you access to Jira, you write some stuff down, I'll start working on it. We never have any collaboration or conversation. The ticket is probably a solution, You're going to tell me what you want, not what problem you want to solve. So there's no ability for me to understand the business problem. There's no ability for me to ideate with you how we might solve it, to discover the best way of solving that, design something that might fix it. I got to go straight into building. Yeah, I've got to go write some code, munch some data to answer that ticket. There's very rarely acceptance criteria. Like, how do I know I've met the brief of solving that problem? There's no feedback loop. I close the ticket, you say thank you, right? How do I know that was valuable? How do I learn anything new? Like, it's just the way we use it, the way we interact, what we expect to come in, what we expect to do with it, what we expect to come out of it is all kind of bound in an anti-pattern around that thing called a ticket. And we've got to realize, where did the ticket come from? It came from ITIL running servers. My server is down, turn it back on. Why are we using that as our primary way as data people to have a conversation with our stakeholders about adding value to the business? Yeah, I'm passionate about that one, right? Because it's the fundamental core problem I see time and time again.
Nature of data is like it's very interactive. It's a lot less structured. Problems are often not very well defined. And I do think that people adopting different project methodologies, like probably Scrum is the biggest one, that were designed for different domains doesn't always translate that well. So I do think that when you're talking about Jira and creating these artificial boundaries of like, this is where the problem, the limitation starts, and this is where your job ends, it's clearly built for another type of job.
So let's get spicy down on the Scrum one, right? Because this is a bugbear of mine. So Agile is not Scrum, but Scrum can help with agility, right? And let's look at what Scrum does. So one of the first things Scrum did was it defined the patterns of Scrum really, really well, right? That's why everybody adopts it, because it actually explains what the patterns are, what the value of those patterns are, and how to implement them. It is a pattern that's based on time boxing. Yeah, we say 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks is the time box of work. That has a whole lot of benefits. It's a pattern that's based on collaboration, the idea of sprint planning, daily stand-ups, demos, retros. They are collaborative ceremonies that are forcing functions. But the key thing is most data teams work using a flow pattern. Yeah, they're like a Kanban, they're like a factory, and that actually is the natural way to work with data, but they do it really badly. So we took any of the lean metrics and applied, how long between the request and the delivery, how many work in progress limit things they have at any one time. They pretty much break every rule of the pattern of flow and lean. So we can apply Scrum or time boxing and those patterns to a data team, and it will change the way they work. But it's a temporary thing. We should use it as a forcing function until we can get them operating properly and then go back to flow. So yeah, I'm everybody bags Scrum, and I'm like, but it has its place, but it's not a solution, right? It's just a tooling that a data team could use if it's useful for them.
Interesting. I heard an interesting thought, which is any type of planning is better than no type of planning. But that doesn't mean that the way that you're choosing doesn't have any drawbacks.
There's a cost to every pattern you apply, right? So, people go, well, we do a daily stand-up and it's 30 minutes and there's no value in it. Well, then stop doing it, right? But if you've got to remember that a lot of times, especially when we worked in person, the only communication and collaboration across the team was a hourly team meeting on a Thursday where the manager talked at them and the team never really spoke to each other, even though they were sitting next to each other about the work they're doing. So yeah, those patterns, they're forcing functions to change behavior or fix a problem. And we've got to realize that, use them while they have value, get rid of them when they don't.
Forcing a pattern, forcing certain behavior. I've been thinking a lot about this topic and what should be the role of a data consultant or a data consultancy or a data team in general when it comes to delivering value in an organization. And I feel like sometimes a ticket factory is also some sort of defensive mechanism. You use it to sort of guard the time. There's just so many little requests coming out of the business. So you're trying to like shape it and sort of tame this giant monster. But then a lot of the work that would position the data team more as, let's say, a driver of revenue never happens. So they wouldn't spend a lot of time like thinking about what are like the structural problems in the business that if we solve them, we would totally drive revenue or drive down cost or increase profit. And you would think data people have all the data. They should be best informed to give an insight and opinion on this. Yet you kind of see more of the reactive style when it comes to like the ticketing and the ticket factory, as you mentioned. What's your perspective on that? I mean, on one end, we're talking about, of course, we have a certain implementation load and we have to make sure that we spend our time most effectively if we're trying to achieve that. But then what is some other side of that? Like, how do we do discovery and figure out what it is that would actually drive meaningful change in the organization?
We're gonna break it down to a couple of lenses, right? Kind of unpick it. So first thing is my standard joke with data people is we're pedantic semantics who never define anything, right? We're kind of like a builder who never finishes their own house. So, we go, oh, the business, worst term ever, right? Just call them stakeholders. They can't define the definition of customer, how we're meant to do that. Yeah, we can't define the definition of data product, semantic layer, right? We're as bad as everybody else. But if we take that and say, okay, where's one of the problems? So one of the problems you mentioned is this idea of interruptions, right? This idea of unplanned work. So I'm a big fan of the Phoenix Project, right? It was a great book. It wasn't about data, right? It was about software. If you read the goal, it's about a physical factory. But what they talk about is unplanned work is waste. And if you look at a data team, the noise of unplanned work, those ad hoc requests, those emergencies, they kill a team, right? They flood them. They basically force them to context switch. Yeah, so it might only be half an hour to go and grab that data and bring it back, but that is 2 hours of concentrated context window disappearing. Um, and interestingly enough, if we look at product teams that used to build software, they were really good at having a window and a focus, right? And building something together. And that's kind of where Agile and Scrum was trying to take the data teams, right? Is that idea of focus and more producty type behavior. So renew the unplanned work or at least manage it. And actually, that's where data is really important. Like, if you can't tell me how many new tickets you got this week that you hadn't planned to work on, then you're not using data to manage your own work. And with AI tooling now, it's really simple to capture it and get it to tell you a story of what you actually did. To come back to your question around consultants, I wrote an article years ago and I talked about the 5 E's, which is if you're going out to become a consultant, think about which of the E you think your business model is based on. So the first E is effort. Yeah, you're going to get paid per hour typically to do work. They're going to bring you in to augment the team, fill a gap, and you're just going to be directed by the customer for the work to be done. Yeah, and that's it, right? Your goal is do good work in those hours. The next one is expertise. So they've got a problem and they know you're the expert. Back when I had my consulting company, we were one of the few SaaS implementation partners. So if there's a couple of us around in the area we were, but if you wanted to implement SaaS, you would come to one of the small number of people consulting companies, right? And that was our expertise. We were experts in SaaS. The next E is experience. That's where actually they've got a problem and there's no expert out there that's actually done it, but you've got enough experience that they know you can solve the problem with them. And then the last one's efficiency, which is they've got a problem and you can just automate it, do it cheaper, faster, better, and it's a pure cost thing, right? So if you're a consultant, figure out which of those E's is your primary value. What do you love doing, right? How's your business model? And then that actually changes the conversation around value. Yeah. So because if it's effort, the value is 40 hours doing what they want. Well, probably better than the internal team, right? That's what I'd always aim to do. If it's an expert, it's solving a problem in a reasonable amount of time, right? You can't spend too long because they're expecting you know how to solve it. If it's experience, it's around co-design. It's around working with the organization and bringing in those patterns and practices to help them understand how to solve that problem. And if it's efficiency, it's pure numbers game, right? It's like, how can you do that work for less effort, faster, cheaper, better than anybody else? Because that's what they're paying for you. So yeah, that's how I think about it when I kind of sat back and looked at consulting companies and consultants.
It's not only important that you're aware of which are your letters, but also that whoever is on the other side of the table also understands those expectations. I think in my history as being a consultant, a handful of misunderstandings were because both sides had a different opinion of how consultancy should work. And hearing it as a model with letters made it click immediately for me.
Think you're selling effort and then they're expecting expertise or experience and a solution, then it's not going to go well for you, right? Because you're going to spend more than 40 hours because you're not paying for hours, right? And you won't be able to bill for it. So yeah, definitely make sure your letter of intent or letter of expectation or statement of work is aligned, that the E you're offering is the E they think they're buying. Yeah.
We also started this conversation by what are some of the things that teams do wrong? But I think it's maybe more interesting to flip the whole premise around. And that is, imagine you are the sole person responsible for a data team in an organization and you don't need to even consult higher ups on how you do it. What is the way that you make them work? What is your project management philosophy that you think works best?
Look at it from a leadership point, not a management point of view, right? So I personally believe that people that lead teams are really successful, people that manage teams aren't. And then as a leader, there's a bunch of things you have to do, right? You have to support and encourage your team to be self-sufficient, self-organizing, depending on which level they're allowed to do in your organization. You have to unblock them. Yeah, when they get stuck and they can't fix the problem, you've got the power. You are the leader to go and remove those roadblocks and let them carry on. You have to be what I call a shit umbrella. Yeah, when all the politics and the corporate bullshit's happening, you have to protect the team from some of that. Not all of it, but some of it, right? Especially if you're wanting them to change the way they work, things will break and get worse before it gets better. So they need a safety net of time to be able to kind of break and re-heal. And that's really important. You may have been a player on the field, you may be a data person or you may not, right? And that kind of changes the way you behave. But you should always be standing behind the team to see what they need you to do to help them, and then leading the team by giving them the idea of a mission or a vision that they should be aiming for. If you think about that, that's hard, right? Compared to being a manager that looks at Jira tickets and say, we need to do more, right? That's easy task, right? Leading to take all those different stances and lenses, that is really hard. And there are, I've worked with a bunch of brilliant natural leaders out there, and I've worked with a bunch of micromanager people, and it's quite obvious the difference to me in terms of the people and also how the team respond.
Interesting. Yeah, I can, every time you said some categories, I could think of bosses of mine that fit into some of them. And the opposite, most of the complaints that I've had about bosses of mine is because of they didn't protect us enough from external politics, not enough vision, and so on. So it's interesting how you break it down into a model.
But then we've got to, if we're the team, we've got to realize that when our leader is leading, like they're dealing with a whole lot of crap, right? And they're probably in meetings 9 hours a day, which is why they're not responding to your Slack message straight away. And we have to back them, right? We have to be like a team. We have to say, actually, we're going to back them and support them to be successful, because otherwise, we're kind of setting them up to fail. And when that happens, that leader will leave. And I can guarantee you won't get a leader next time, you will get a manager, because that's what the organization will do next, typically. Yeah. This is all typically, right? This is all typical things I often see rather than a rule of law. Yeah.
Of protecting your team. And then the obvious question, I think, is, once you're a consultant, kind of out of on your own when you're talking to an organization. So how do you deal with something like that? What should you prepare yourself for once you switch to a more consultant role?
If you're working with an organization that has a team, a data and analytics team already, and you're helping them out, so you're not working on your own in complete isolation, are you a consultant or are you just an employee that's paid in a different way?
I think in that case, you could say the dynamics are similar. But if we're talking about someone that's hired for their expertise, like let's say a value consultant, it might be that they come in as the only data consultant an organization has, or maybe they're a smaller company and don't have a whole data function and team. Like, how do you come into those rooms and have the conversation on, like, hey, this is what data is supposed to look like and how that should work?
Have the capability or the skills to solve it, and you're going to come in and solve that, right? You're going to bring a solution, design a solution, fix that problem. That's what you focus on, right? It's like, I'm getting paid to make that problem go away. If there's a data analytics team already there, what I would always say is leave something valuable behind. Yeah, like, just if you find somebody and you can coach them or teach them some part of what you do it. Yeah, if you can hand back really good documentation, or now it's an AI skill, right, that helps them redo that work in the future, do it, right? Like, just deliver a little bit more than the solution that your expertise was meant to deliver to the team that's there, and you'll find that everything changes. I don't know why, right? But you walk away happier. They're happier to have you there. They don't see you as a threat, kind of thing. So that's that. If you're going in on your own, you've got to think about the maturity of the organization and where you're starting and where you're expected to leave them. Because often organizations and leaders will, like they're not, as you said, they're not clear about what they're buying. So it's like, "Oh, come and put the solution in. Oh, but if you could actually leave a whole data modeling, physical data modeling methodology in a way we can teach the rest of the people we're going to hire in next week, that would be good too." I was like, well, hold on, that's coaching as well as delivery of expertise, and if that's what our agreement is, good, right? But if it's not, there's a mismatch of expectations there again, and that happens a lot. So yeah, I'd be really clear on what I'm being paid to deliver, to fix. It doesn't need to be a big contract, right? Because the other problem is your pattern, you'll go to an anti-pattern where it's lots of bullet points. And the problem with that is you have no agility. It's like, oh, I'm going to deliver you a PowerPoint deck of 20 slides. Well, okay, I've got 19 valuable ones. I'm just going to put a crappy 20th one in there because that's what the contract says. So it's an interesting balance, right, between intent, outcome, solution, and doing the work. And that is a balance, and good consultants know how to do that. Yeah.
Shane, I think I'm gonna regret not asking this one, so I'm gonna go for it. I think lots of people listening to this are maybe more senior contributors. They're not too worried anymore about the tech part. They know what's their value, but they're looking to how they can step up and become leaders inside of their team. Sometimes that's in the form of how I get promoted. How do I show people that I'm ready to take more responsibility, or how do I eventually become like a manager? What is your advice for people in that position?
Maturity for roles, right? And so I talk about novice, which is never done that before. A practitioner, which basically means I can do the job day in and day out and do a good job, right? I'm good at it. Adept means I can do the job day in, day out, and when I get a gnarly problem, I can 9 times out of 10 solve it. I can adapt, right, and fix that problem that I've never seen before. Expert, right, which is I am the man, I am the person, right, who everybody comes to for this thing, and then coach, yeah, which is the top level. And novice, adept, practitioner, adept, and experts are about doing the work. When you come to coaching, then you have to change stance, because your role is no longer to do the work, it's to help other people do the work like you used to and become an expert. And so we used to have this joke, right, that managers got promoted to their highest level of incompetence, and that was because they were technically an expert, right? They were the best person for doing that job, And then the organization goes, great, you're going to lead a team. We're not going to give you any training on how to lead people, how to manage HR, how to deal with people who have personal crises at home, how to deal with politics in the organization, how to get budget to hire somebody, how to get approval to let somebody go off on leave for a month because they want to go visit family somewhere else and we have a 2-week policy. Like, if you think about all the things you have to learn as a leader of a team when you move into that coaching level, most people aren't taught it. So think about that, right? Think about it. It's a different, completely different job, a different set of skills, which comes back to the second pattern I use, which is T skills. Although you see L skills, E skills, and a whole lot of stuff. And that is thinking about the skills that you have that are both technology, so the ability to use Snowflake, DBT, Databricks, the skills that are kind of technology based but outside tooling, so the ability to engineer, write tests, do documentation, do releases, and then the skills that are kind of in the data space but not really what we call core data skills, so facilitation, workshop running, managing stakeholders, those kind of things. And so if you draw a picture, right, you basically draw each skill as a line, and then as you go down it, figure out where you sit for each of those skills. Are you a novice? Are you a practitioner? Are you adept? Are you an expert? Are you a coach? And then for your career, figure out what you want to do. Do you want to get deeper and more expert in a small set of those skills? And that's what we call the T, right? You're broad, and then you've got depth, but a thin depth. Are you like me? You enjoy change, so you want to be broad, yeah, and so you're just going to keep jumping left and right and getting new skills, and that's what you want to do. And once you understand that, then you can understand what you need to do next in your career. Yeah. Like if I'm a data engineer, do I want to become an analytics engineer is the buzzword this week, right? What does that actually mean, right? Or do I want to become a product person? So I want to jump over around, requirements, facilitation, stakeholder management, and get more into the product space and the idea of problem and ideation and discovery. Like it's almost when I was a kid, used to read these books called Choose Your Own Adventure. So it's paper, you go in and it goes, you come to a crossroads, you want to go left or right. Think about it that way, right? You got some choices and then map out your career journey and then experiment and see how you get there. That's what I recommend people do.
Need to learn skills that you may not be very comfortable with when you're in leadership positions. What are some of those skills when you're in consulting or running a data consulting company that, in your experience, are critical to making it work?
You and manage the stakeholders that they're reporting to, then you've got a problem. Even if you're just doing effort, even if you're doing 40 hours a week, right? You have to be visible. Your person paying you has to see that you're doing 40 hours a week. And manage is probably not the right word as I think about it. I mean, it's probably more collaborate, engage with, all those kind of fluffy words. But yeah, if you're not doing that, you're in problem. The next thing is make all the work you do visible. Yeah. Don't, like, engineers love to go into a dark cave, and spend 2 weeks just nutting out a thing. Don't do that. It doesn't matter which year you're doing, right? You don't have to over communicate, but you have to communicate. Figure out how you're going to give an update around success. Yeah. So as you're progressing and ticking off the things you have to deliver, whether it's hours or things, figure out ways that you can make it visible that you're ticking those off for you and for them. And so a lot of consultants, when they start out, they treat it like a job. Yeah, they're an employee. They don't have to worry about the second part, which is all the selling and managing. They don't worry about pipeline. And I'm like, because again, what typically happens is somebody who comes from an employee to be a consultant will end up with one big customer. And that's great until that one big customer leaves. It's like, now I've got no customer, which goes back to one of my key things. If you're going to go out in consulting for your first time, you need to make sure that you have 6 months worth of money in your bank that you can use if shit hits the fan, and you will need it at some stage in the first 3 years. Yeah. And there has to be money that covers your costs, your family costs, or whatever cost you need to do for up to 6 months. If you don't do that, you're really putting yourself at risk. So bank the cash. It can be on your mortgage, but you have to be able to get it and spend it if you need to. That will make you sleep better at night.
I mean, you kind of hit on it a little bit. You need to have pipeline. So, uh, how should a data consultant approach this? Let's say they have 6 to 12 months to generate a pipeline with leads. What should they do? What should they do on the marketing and on the sales side to position themselves? Maybe um, create certain assets to be an expert in the field. How should they think about it? What are some strategic things they can do? And yeah, what's your perspective on this? As you've obviously applied this a lot in practice yourself.
So I'd probably suggest you get Jody Hirsch on. He's much better at explaining some of the patterns than I am. But um, so the first thing I'd do is an anti-pattern, right? And the anti-pattern is outsourcing your sales to somebody else at the beginning of your journey, like expecting another consulting company to sell you for free, or hiring a salesperson, right, who actually doesn't know what you do. You're asking for a hiding. So don't do that at the beginning. You need to figure out how you sell. Like, what are you comfortable? Do you like writing content and giving it away for free? Does that feel comfortable? Because what happens with data people is that, like, selling is dirty. Like, you don't do it, right? Unless you're a data product manager, right? It's a dirty thing. It's like those, especially if you work in a software company, those salespeople there, yeah, they promise us shit. But you have to sell, right? It's like it's now part of your business. So think about how you do it. Do you do it through relationships? Do you prefer to be part of a team that somebody else is leading and selling, right? Which means you're going to subcontract to another consulting company, and that's where you're going to start out. Do you already have a network? So when I say you shouldn't go out consulting if you don't have 6 months worth of salary, you probably shouldn't go out if you don't have a network that you can identify of people that you can talk to. That they may not give you the work, but they'll know somebody who needs help and they will recommend you. So that idea of a relationship. So typically you'll find that when you go out on your own, your first deals will come through some form of relationship. You know, setting up a website that says we do data shit, or, you know, right data, right time, right person, or any of those standard, you know, we do data strategy and we do data platform, or I'm a DBT and Snowflake expert. You need a website. It's valuable, right? But it's not going to get your business 9 times out of 10. So figure out how you're going to find the people that you can help, and then how you would like to persuade them or encourage them or prove to them that you can help them.
Network of people you have around you is critical for that first few customers, maybe even all of them throughout your consulting career, depending on what you're exactly doing. Uh, you do mention also engineers like to go into a cave and code and like not do much of that stuff. Uh, I found that a lot of people, and I've had some conversations here on this podcast before as well on this, is that they underestimate how much work they need to put into something like that. And then they decide, oh, I want to go to consulting. And then they wonder, like, why is this such a steep hill to climb? uh,
And sorry, that's a really good point, right? Is that when you start out on your own, if you're out on your own, it is 40 hours a week doing the work, 40 hours a week finding the work, and 20 hours a week doing the drossy admin stuff like your taxes, your expenses, invoicing, chasing up money. Because that's the other one that people don't realize is you will find customers that will not pay you on time. You will find customers that expect to not pay you for 90 days after you've done the work. You are a bank to them. It is not an income like an employee salary that turns up every fortnight. So be careful on that one, right? The way the money go around happens is not what happens when you're an employee. Ooh. Ooh, brutal.
Okay, a big corporation absorbed that, but if it would have been me as a freelancer, I would have been sad.
It's the same as when they ask you for a discount. You know, the conversation you should be having is, okay, which part of the offering I'm proposing don't you want me to do? that's really hard, right? That doesn't go well typically. So you need to find, like, you need to think about if you're going in to talk to a customer about an opportunity, and when they ask you about a discount, you need to know what you're going to respond with before you have that conversation. So otherwise, you kind of like, I suppose. And if you haven't been in work for 3 months, you're going to be more likely to take the discount because you want the money. Yeah. So you need to be really clear about your value and what you're willing to compromise to give that discount.
Similar to how you sell a house, and then people are like, yeah, but I'm not going to pay the price because there is like this little imperfection here and there. Clients will also do that to consultants, and it's not personal. Regardless of who you are or where as a person, they were going to do, oh yeah, but you're not certified in this or that. And so a lot of times it's going to be confrontative to tie your worth with you as a person. And some clients, because you're external, are going to put you in weird situations.
Consultants often feel like it's okay to be paid after they've done the work. It's kind of like plumbers, right? Plumber turns up, plumber fixed my pipe, I pay the plumber. But why don't we get money up front? Why don't we say, I want you to pay me a certain amount in the beginning and then pay me as we go? Like, why don't we ask for that? Because not many people do, right? But we're doing the work on day one. Like, we got to pay our bills. Why should we bankroll the customer? And again, it's just we fall into these norms, right? And so, again, go back to figure out what's important to you. If you don't need the cash because you've got enough money in the bank, and that's okay, right? But actually, if you are pretty tight, you haven't got your 6 months, then maybe getting the cash early is more important to you than the rate you get, right? Think about what actually is valuable for this part of work. Maybe you're going into a customer which has technology. They're working on an AI harness for the data analytics team, and you're like, yeah, I want that. I want to play with that. I want that on my CV. I want that experience, right? So I'll discount what I charge if I'm going to go and do something that is ultra cool or something I really wanted to do in anger. The value to me is way different than going in and doing something differently. So again, it comes back to that idea of what's value for you.
Sense of how much proof and trust can you build that you are able to deliver on what you say you're going to deliver, right? And what I've also found quite often is you'll have people transitioning to consulting, and then there's like almost no public record of them, except maybe a CV and like a GitHub repo that's sort of half-assed, and then they expect, well, I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna give you a pitch, and they're gonna pay me. They're totally gonna trust me to do the job, and that's obviously a very hard conversation once you have that for the first time. But what would you recommend to people to sort of put themselves out there in public and sort of create that persona and sort of the trust that helps you have these difficult conversations and sort of tip the scales in your favor when you do get into these gnarly negotiations?
If you're leaving your organization, I would expect them to support you if I ask them how you did. Now, the problem is you may be leaving, they may not want you to leave, right? And they're being dicks about it, but most people are good people. So, yeah, it depends where you live. When I was in Wellington, it was a relationship town. If you ever wanted to work with somebody, you'd go and ask 3 people over coffee, and they would know somebody who knew them, or they knew them, and you get this kind of network effect. In Auckland, it was very transactional, and that didn't happen as much. So the way you trusted somebody was different. So first thing is network, trust. People trust people. The second thing is your personal brand. And we've got to be really clear what I mean about that. Your personal brand is what somebody else says to somebody else about you. Yeah. So, personal brand for Tony is what I say to Juan about Tony, right? That is the perception of your brand. And we should think about the brand we want to portray. Tony, you and I are on Practical Data Community, right? With great community, PDC, yell out there for anybody that's in the data space.
Shout out everyone from the Practical Data community listening in. Yes.
And when I'm there, I shit post as much as I try and help people, right? It's just where I go. It's just the thing. But from my point of view, that still aligns with my personal brand, right? You know, I come from New Zealand. I have a very deep vein of sarcasm. But I'm kind of myself there, you know, probably not as professional as I am if I'm somewhere else, but I'm still within what I see as my personal brand window. And that's what people should be doing, right? They should be figuring out how do they want to be perceived in the market, and then they should curate everything in the right way to be that, be natural, right? So, you know, if you want to be professional, then don't write AI slop. Yeah, like if you want to be seen as a data expert, do not post a diagram from Claude that says medallion architecture, data warehouse, and data mesh, and say 3 architectures, because nobody who's an expert who knows their shit is going to go, you know that medallion architecture is not a freaking architecture, right? And you know that data mesh is an operating model, not a layered data architecture. Like, you just, how can you? And so if you do that on LinkedIn, you're going to lose the trust of people who know what they're doing, in my opinion, right? All my opinion. So just think about it, right? Just think about your personal brand, how you want to be perceived, and then make sure everything aligns. And then if it makes you uncomfortable, if writing posts make you uncomfortable, if being on a podcast makes you uncomfortable, don't do it, because it'll come across that you don't like doing it. You still need to push yourself though, right? Like, why can't you write a small article in the way you like to write? Yeah, that's valuable. But yeah, don't pretend to be who you're not. So I rambled a bit on that one, but that's how I see it.
Don't end up on the wall of shame, right?
Don't end up on the wall of shame. Like, seriously, if you drop into a community, sit there and watch it for a couple of weeks before you post, apart from, hi, I'm Shane and this is my background. Like, see how the community acts and what's acceptable. Like, why would you go straight in the community and just start shelling without understanding whether it's acceptable or not? It flabbergasts me. Yeah.
Also, one thing that is worth mentioning for us is we do have the advantage that data work tends to be very tangible. Like, you can put out there your code repositories, you can write articles. A lot of jobs don't have that privilege. So, like, making a personal brand is a lot more based on vibes. If you are, I don't know, maybe something like a lawyer where you're not allowed to flaunt about your work too much, or maybe like a coach that the work is a lot more intangible. So we do have, as data people, more control over our personal brand. And that's one thing that we don't.
The AI world we live in now. So, I was watching something where some founder was selling a piece of software that allows, when you're doing an interview, for you to have it on the side of your screen, and it's listening to the question and giving you the answer. And it's also giving you screenshots of the leak code answers for anything that you can paste back as if you wrote it. Yeah. And it's all undetectable, supposedly. And now it's the same with portfolios, right? I mean, I used to say, don't code, can't code, won't code as me, right? I am not an engineer. I cannot code. But I sure as shit can go into Claude Code now and get something working. Like, the code's ugly, but it works, right? And I'm just wondering now, that trust, back to that trust question, with the ability to cheat to a degree, the level of expertise we have through other people's code, AI slop, those kind of things. Yeah. If you're a data person now, how do you prove how good you are? I'm intrigued by that. What do you two think?
Personally, I mean, you mentioned you need to do something you're comfortable with and show who you really are. Publish a small article, go to the podcast, do all these things. I would like to say, like, you have to force yourself. If you aren't unable to do something like this, how do you expect you're going to have a good conversation with a customer, a lead, or any of these people? You're going to do a lot of written communication. You're going to do a lot of talking to them live. And these are skills that are very, very difficult to fudge, even with AI. If you look at a lot of people will tell text is AI generated right away. Why? Because It's incoherent in places. It's a bit uncanny. It's sort of um, it's sort of an average piece of text. It has no personality. It doesn't really show anything that you do or you think. And I personally feel the way you counter that is by showing that your brain still works. You put out pieces that require cognition and that show it. I think personally that is the most important way to distinguish. And I think it's quite funny that with AI it becomes actually even easier to distinguish yourself, because there's so many people that have this almost a gambling like addiction of pushing the claw button and pushing out all these kinds of things, and they think they're doing something, they think they're being productive, they think they're building their brand, doing the opposite. And then you come in and you write one good piece and people are like, wow, what, how refreshing is that? I want to work with this guy. That's how I look at it.
We're in a weird transition because we're still, as humanity, recalibrating how much we can expect of humans, what still means being authentic or skillful. So we're in this weird stage where like we keep on surprising each other. But I do think eventually we as humanity are going to gravitate more towards non-digital things. I expect a hot take here. I expect a resurgence in things like sculpting, like painting with brushes. So for us, data people that our job is so digital, skills like talking talking to people in a meetup, giving a presentation, training are going to become a lot more important. And if you happen to be good at any of those, then that's an easier way to stand out because as of now, as of today, when we're recording, this might age very poorly in a few years. Still doing things like this, like a podcast, still feels human, still feels authentic. But writing an article, it's a lot harder because you're competing with the billions of people that are pushing AI stuff. So even if your article is amazing, it's a lot harder to find. Once they find you and they realize, ooh, for example, what Tony writes is real, it's authentic, it's like nothing the AI generates, people might be more loyal. But right now you're being affected by people actually finding you in the sea of LinkedIn posts that are generated with Claude.
Remember very vividly when I was living in Silicon Valley 5, 6 years ago, the people that had a much higher odd at getting into these companies of like crazy interview cycles were the one that got an internal referral. How do you get an internal referral? Well, you know people, you're like in the network, you mingle, they kind of feel confident doing that to you. And it's the same with anything you produce. I don't think that has changed substantively. There's more content out there in aggregate, but the way that people find you and like trust you and are interested in reading what you have to write and listening to what you have to say and wanting to buy what you want to buy, it's still a human endeavor, and you need to like connect with people to make it work. And I don't think that's gonna go away. It's gonna stay. And yeah, I don't know.
I think, to both your points, I think we're going to end up with more tribal behavior in our society and in the data space. So back to that network and this idea of tribes and tribes being smaller than the general mass, and then networks and relationships. The other thing about writing that's really interesting is, so I was mentoring a Masters of Data Science student in New Zealand last year, and I had him do a portfolio, and then I had him write about it. And it wasn't because, he did a website, did a brilliant job of his website actually, and he had somewhere he could point to. But the key point to him was, by writing down your experience doing that portfolio, you're telling yourself a story. You're crafting the words and the steps of what you did. And so what he found when he went into the interviews and they asked him, blah, 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 he had already written that story, right? Like he didn't read it out, but he'd already crafted it, that I did this and then I did this and then I got stuck on this. And he had that story arc. And, he came across in the interviews really, really well because he could articulate something with clarity because he'd already written about it. So again, if you don't like writing for other people, write for yourself. It will force you to think, right? It will force you to go, you know what? I can't actually explain that bit in the middle. I thought I knew it really well, but I can't write it in a way that makes sense. So actually, I don't understand it. Write it yourself, even if it's bad, right? Because it'll force you to think about things that you don't tend to think about in detail.
We are learning this the hard way, writing a book, me and Juan.
Yeah.
You think I have a lot to say about this topic, and I have a very good picture of how to explain this, and then you start writing it, and you're like, wait a second. Actually, I'm not so sure about this part. And then you go over it again and again and again. And then at some point you figure out the story arc in a way to bring it more engagingly. But it is a process. And I've noticed that it's interesting you mentioned writing. I think like writing the book is the first time in like 2 or 3 years that I feel like my brain is like hurting from all the thinking and the thought I'm putting into it. Because coding at this point just feels like an automated AI system. Once I know what I need, it's like, well, go make this, go make that, and my brain doesn't do much at that point anymore. It's just waiting for results.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, writing a book or teaching, self-flagellation is to write the book. The second part of self-flagellation is to give it somebody and then watch them not understand what the hell you were trying to get across.
Some compliments there. Like a lot of the topics that we have been talking about, I've kind of mentioned some of them, but I'm impressed by the way that you kind of break things down into models. For example, the which of the E's you are. I think there is a paragraph in there that is written kind of like that, but nowhere near as elegant as you're doing. So the self-reflection there, it's
Probably 3, maybe 4 decades now. And so I've kind of thought about like where's my journey gone and why do I do what I do now? And I started because I used to read a lot. And there was this theory that I read about where when you're young, it's all about speed and adaptation, right? When the lion comes to eat you, you ran faster than anybody else. Yeah. Um, and then, as you got a bit older, it came around collaboration. You were good at working with, your local village and the tribe, and as a group, you were really successful. But when you get to a slightly older, you're not fast anymore, yeah, and you're kind of not in the group as much as everybody else. So you have to become really good at pattern recognition. Like I can see that there was a line here, so I can't run faster than everybody else, and my tribe are probably going to push me out to be the first person to be eaten. So I want to kind of see the pattern before anybody else does. And as I thought more about that, that's where I got in my head is, as you get slightly older and more experienced, you get better at seeing patterns. They're still really hard to articulate. Yeah. Like how do you like you can see them and there, but how do you articulate to somebody that that's a pattern? It's a good solution for a common problem. And then how do you explain the anti-pattern? The context of don't do it then. Yeah. Because it probably won't work. So yeah, pattern recognition is kind of an intriguing thing.
Engaging storyteller, Shade. I could listen on forever here, but we are nearing the end of this session. So, if you want to tell people what's next, where can people find you? Anything you want to bring up here? Yeah.
The easiest way to find me is just search agility, and something will pop up that'll take you to somewhere I am or somewhere I've been. I still spend a bit of time on LinkedIn for my sins. I don't spend time on X. There's a couple of websites out there where I share what I do. So just search for that. Yeah, get hold of me. If you want to talk, I'm always happy to help anybody. Have a conversation. Do whatever I can to kind of make the data space more fun. Happy to share. I always say sharing is caring, right? So, let's do more of it.
Scaring indeed. Thank you again for coming on the podcast. I had a great conversation. Thank you for all the wisdoms you've shared with us. I hope me and Juan can also get to this point that we have 4 decades of experience and then reflect back and share back to the community. And yeah, see you around.